Good morning, everybody. We're going to start with a couple of Zoom reminders. So if you experience any Zoom technical issues, please call 1-888-799-9666 and choose option 2. Your audio will be streamed through your speakers. You could submit questions at any time using the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. This session is recorded, and that recording, along with the slides and the session summaries, will be posted shortly after the event at thefdp.org. If you are a member of the press, we ask that you please identify yourself using the Q&A box in the bottom of your screen. Just put your name and also your affiliation. And now I'm going to pass it over to Maria Koszalka to give us some opening remarks.
Good morning. I'm Maria Koszalka, Executive Director of the FDP. On behalf of our co-chairs, Alex Albinak, Associate Vice Provost for Research Administration at Johns Hopkins University, and Michele Masucci, Vice Chancellor for Research and Economic Development at the University System of Maryland, I'd like to welcome you to our September 2024 virtual meeting. We're really pleased that so many of you could join us for the meeting this week, as we are looking forward to an exciting program. I'd like to thank Barbara Gardner of Tufts University, Chair of the Program Committee, as well as all of the committee members for once again creating an outstanding program through their extensive efforts over the course of the last several months. I know that you will agree, having attended the many sessions offered this week, that it is an exciting venue. Not to be forgotten, I wanted to give our gratitude to Sarah Ketchuk, who's the Senior Program Assistant for the FDP, and also to recognize our National Academy partners, Tom Arison, Michael Nestor, and Tom Wang. So now I'll turn it over to Alex for her comments.
Thanks, Maria. Welcome everybody to our September meeting. It's a pleasure to be here, and I look forward to having many opportunities to interact with our membership and participants over the next 3 days. I want to use this opportunity to thank the hundreds of volunteers that commit their time and effort to FDP. They work to help drive our mission and achieve our vision of enabling research to do more research and less administration. It's important to acknowledge the significant work that continues throughout the year, apart from our 3 meetings. And I want to encourage each of you who have interest to reach out a committee of interest and offer your expertise. The volunteers of FDP, they can serve in various capacities, everything from taking notes during our meetings to leading working groups and committees, and then also providing leadership at their institutions that serves to help move forward and support FDP's mission. This effort is a critical component. Our volunteers, we wouldn't be here without you. So it's a strong and vibrant community, and I encourage everybody that's interested to participate. Some of the committee activities will be discussed in all sorts of sessions during the next 3 days, and some are in concurrent, but to ensure that you don't miss out, keep in mind we have a closing plenary that will provide committee updates and some closing remarks. And to start the program, we have Dr. Darryl Pines, who's the president of the University of Maryland and the co-chair of GUIRR, the Government University Industry Research Roundtable. Michelle's going to elaborate a little bit more on that and introduce him following our remarks. And then finally, this is a moment in time that I really want to mention. We're approaching a milestone, and that is that our faculty co-chair, Michele, she's going to be reaching the end of her term. We still have some time. She's going to talk a little bit about the process, but I did just want to take this opportunity as the kickoff to recognize her outstanding work and all the contributions she's made to this association. She's provided leadership that has enabled FDP to move forward in many ways, both in business improvements, structural changes, and program initiatives. And particularly, one of the exciting things that she's going to talk about in this meeting is she has a working group, the faculty workload survey. It's been a number of years. They're putting a lot of thought into ensuring continuity in the longitudinal assessment aspects of the survey, while also trying to drive it forward and capture some of our most current issues and compliance burdens and how that might look moving forward over the next decades. So she'll be talking about that during the faculty meeting, as well as the discussion of the co-chair position and how best to determine to find someone to fill those enormous shoes. Of course, they're figuratively speaking, but yeah, I just wanted to say that, and then I'm going to turn it over to Michele.
Thank you, Alex. I know where you're going with that, so I appreciate it. Yes, we have a very packed agenda for our faculty business meeting on Wednesday. As the faculty co-chair, I want to extend a particular welcome to the faculty. Many of the items on the agenda are tailored to be of significant interest for the faculty. Were we in person, I would have the faculty stand so that we could recognize them, but we'll do a virtual recognition because they do contribute so much to the organization. In addition to today's upcoming plenary, which I will introduce shortly, tomorrow we will be welcoming Mushtaq Gunga, who is the Executive Director of the Carnegie Classification System and Senior Vice President of ACE. We have transitioned what is usually our recurring faculty forum into this plenary session to ensure that both faculty and all FDP participants are updated on the changes to the system we use to assess the landscape of higher education characterization, which goes into effect beginning in 2025. As always, all are invited to join tomorrow's faculty hosted happy hour. It's a good way to meet new people and get to know the faculty better. And on Wednesday's faculty business meeting, as Alex alluded, we'll be discussing the workload survey and the process for nominating a new faculty co-chair. That process will begin with a nomination procedure after this meeting closes. But we're very excited that in January, we will have a panel discussion of all of the nominees so that the faculty can get to know them better. And that will be followed by a selection process in the spring. So stay tuned for more information about that for all of our members, and certainly for our faculty. We'll be discussing that at length on Wednesday. Our program agenda is packed with research policy content, which is reflecting the recent development across agencies and institutions, including, but not limited to, the launch of the Secure Center, which will be led by the University of Washington, and is the subject of yet another plenary here in our meetings over the next 3 days. But we've also seen the release of the 2024 Public Health Service Policies on Research Misconduct, which were just put out last week, NIST IR 84081, Cybersecurity for Research Findings and Possible Path Forwards. That report is now open for comment, and it's the subject of our second plenary this morning. And of course, today recognizes concurrent COBRA webinar on AI and research administration and the National Academy's session on assessing research security efforts in higher ed, a meeting of the experts. So we have lots going on. We really appreciate your time. And we want to thank the Program Planning Committee one more time for all the work that they have done to put this compelling program together in the midst of all of these concurrent things that are happening in institutions we're all connected to. I'd like to turn our attention now to welcoming the University of Maryland's president and academic co-chair of GUIRR, President Darryl Pines. As you know, both GUIRR and FDP are convened by the National Academies under the auspices of the Division of Policy and Global Affairs. As Maria said, we're very grateful to Tom Arison, Michael Nestor, and Tom Wang for all of the work that they do to support this relationship. And we're very happy to recognize that GUIRR is celebrating its 40th anniversary, which President Pines will discuss, and that gives us an opportunity at FDP to reflect on all of the accomplishments along the way. It is my very distinct honor and privilege to introduce President Pines, who is my friend and colleague at the University of Maryland, which is the flagship university of the University System of Maryland. He is also the Glenn L. Martin Professor of Aerospace Engineering. He previously served as the Nariman Farvardin Professor of Engineering and the Dean of the A. James Clark School of Engineering, where he elevated the school's national and international stature through significant academic leadership and research. President Pines was elected to the National Academy of Engineering in 2019 for his impact on engineering education, having led transformative changes during his 11-year tenure as dean. He revamped undergraduate education teaching, boosted student competition participation, and expanded sustainability and entrepreneurship efforts. Under his leadership, students achieved top honors in various competitions and launched innovative initiatives like Startup Shell and major hackathons. President Pines has emphasized diversity throughout his career, contributing to significant increases in underrepresented faculty and student enrollment. He also spearheaded the Engineering for Us All, E4USA, program with a $4 million NSF grant and served as chair of the National Academy of Engineers Frontiers in Engineering Education Symposium. As a co-principal investigator, the University of Maryland became a National Science Foundation Advanced Grant recipient to further develop a culture of inclusive excellence focused on improving work environments, retention, and advancement of tenured and tenure-track women faculty in ways that improve culture for all faculty. The Clark School under Pines became a research leader with over $137 million in annual expenditures and established key interdisciplinary centers. His tenure also saw the successful fundraising, nearly $220 million gift from the A. James and Alice B. Clark Foundation, supporting scholarships and innovative projects like the Emilio Fernandez Idea Factory. Before his deanship, President Pines led the Department of Aerospace Engineering and worked at DARPA and the Lawrence Livermore National Lab, contributing to the Clementine spacecraft program. His research includes structural dynamics and aerospace vehicle control. President Pines is a fellow of several professional organizations and holds degrees from UC Berkeley and MIT. We are very honored, President Pines, that you have joined us here today. Thank you so much for taking time out of your very busy schedule to talk about GUIRR. I'm turning it over to you now.
Thank you, Dr. Masucci. It's an honor and privilege to be here. I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully all of this works. Okay, so thank you, Dr. Masucci, and thank you to FDP. It is an honor and privilege to be able to give this presentation on behalf of many colleagues around the nation, but especially my colleagues at the National Academies under the leadership of Michael Nestor and his entire team. Plus, I represent only a fraction of the co-chair. I'm the academic co-chair for GUIRR. My counterpart is the co-chair for industry, Dr. Danielle Murfield. So I'm grateful to her as well, and to the previous two co-chairs, Dr. Lori Leshin and Mr. Al Grasso, who is the industry co-chair. So I wanted to talk to you guys about, GUIRR at this incredible interface and inflection point in its history, which is the 40th anniversary of the Government University Industry Research Roundtable. So my goal today is to talk about GUIRR and its mission so that everybody understands GUIRR and its mission, and then kind of walk you through sort of the history of GUIRR and what its accomplishments have been, and then kind of talk to you about where we are today. We're sort of going through these threads of what we call the axioms of innovation, and then the changing dynamics of GUIRR as we look forward to the next 20 to 40 years of its impact. And then I'll talk a little bit about my university and how we've leveraged this research roundtable to pivot and focus on societal grand challenges. And then I'll end with the work ahead for GUIRR. So again, I'm grateful. If you don't know this image, if you've never been to the National Academies, this is the underside of the dome of the Great Hall of the National Academies. And it's just a wonderful image of history in our nation, but also as it respects the National Academies. So I'm going to again talk about GUIRR and its mission, and I'm going to walk you through how GUIRR was started, and then essentially give you what its mission issues are. So it was started and founded in 1984 as the first of the National Academies government research roundtable convenings, and ever since that time, it's been really sort of the crux of the U.S. research enterprise ecosystem, where some of the most leading ideas come and they are discussed, and some of them affect policy, some of them affect partnership models, some of them affect where the technology is moving. So it's a very exciting and eclectic group of folks that show up at GUIRR meetings. But we sit, as Dr. Masucci mentioned, within the National Academies Policy and Global Affairs Division, and we provide that unique forum for dialogue among top government officials, university officials, industry leaders of the national science and technology research enterprise. So it's a very interesting convening group, because usually these groups don't come together and talk to one another, but it's under GUIRR that they actually do. Again, here's the organizational chart. You all know the academies. You know the 3 academies of the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine. We have the National Research Council, which is sort of the operating arm of the national academies, and within that, there are several divisions, and the Division of Policy and Global Affairs has several units, and this is where GUIRR resides underneath that umbrella. So what is GUIRR and what is its mission? So GUIRR is simply a convening platform for honest and open conversation and idea exchange for senior leaders and decision makers across the U.S. research and innovation ecosystem. GUIRR also monitors and identifies opportunities and challenges at the intersection between cutting-edge research and development and the collaborative space within government, university, and industry partnerships. So we're always looking for new kinds of partnership models that we can share with the community and that can be leveraged to advance the U.S. research enterprise. And then finally, GUIRR derives networking, discussion, and action on critical issues related to national and global science and technology agenda. So it's an opportunity for stakeholder groups to come together, network, partner for new opportunities going forward. So it brings people together from disparate domain spaces of government, industry, academia, and other areas, even not-for-profits, to come together, and then these partnerships and networking emerges. What's the core membership of GUIRR and who shows up to GUIRR? So GUIRR is comprised, has a council, and the council helps define topics and discussion topics of GUIRR meetings. The council is comprised of National Academy presidents, so the 3 presidents of the National Academy of Sciences, the National Academy of Medicine, the National Academy of Engineering. They are members of the GUIRR Council. Then heads of major federal research R&D agencies, of NOAA, of NASA, of the Department of Defense. And then we have folks like myself, university presidents or vice presidents of research that are from the academic space. And then we have industry CEOs and at times CTOs who are members of the GUIRR Council. There are also university partners who support GUIRR through funding and partnerships, and industry partners who also support GUIRR through funding. Now, when you look at the full makeup of the GUIRR Council and its membership, it's roughly 26% industry, 31% government, and about 43% the university domain. So it is that convening entity that brings these groups together to discuss the U.S. research enterprise and ecosystem. How does GUIRR determine its topics, and what topics and categories do they typically fall in? So the topics typically come from the GUIRR Council membership, and it's through a sort of 2 to 3 hour mini kind of discussion session that happens at every GUIRR meeting, which talks about new topics to bring to the GUIRR consortium, which is all of you out there. It's chosen by the GUIRR Council, again, following a member vote. We vote on what topics we want to move forward. We also vote on what topics we might want to have as a form of a webinar or a technology demonstration. And then the workshop themes emerge from that discussion. And then they're typically bracketed when we go forward in sort of three areas. So new and emerging technologies, science and policy and society, and then competitiveness and innovation. And often we can be in all areas for a given workshop, but sometimes we narrow in on just say innovation and competitiveness. But typically these are the topics in which the domain spaces in which GUIRR recommendations come forward in, and how we kind of sort of put it around the pie chart. So why is GUIRR important? Why it's a difference maker? And there are a lot of reasons, as you can imagine, if you participated. So first of all, we are very fortunate. Because of our backing under the umbrella of the national academies, we are able to engage directly with very high-level policymakers and develop extensive leadership networks within the GUIRR ecosystem. So we usually get the highest research officials of every government organization, industry, and academia to talk about some topic related to either policy and society, competitiveness and innovation, or technology. Number 2, it helps advance relationships between these different sectors because they don't often talk enough with one another, and it sort of helps to break down and remove barriers to effective collaboration and actually catalyzes action by just simply having the convening. Number three, we realized new opportunities to meet, engage, network, collaborate with senior thought leaders from federal research agencies, companies, foundations, and other research universities around the United States and sometimes outside of the United States. Number four, it heightens an awareness and understanding of diverse perspectives on scientific matters of national and global importance and access to the policy levers to affect change. And number five, we hear about and learn from the different perspectives of divergent and diverse industries and disciplines and organizations that you wouldn't normally hear about on a day-to-day basis. And then finally, it allows us to participate in 3 convenings per year in which the full membership comes together of the GUIRR, and then we open up our workshops to the surrounding US research community. So we are at this major anniversary that we just started on earlier June of this year, and really to kind of reflect and then look forward as to what's the future of what GUIRR could be. So I'm going to walk you back through a little bit of history. So again, as I said earlier, we began in this timeline in 1984. We were the first roundtable ever convened by the National Academies, and therefore we are the oldest convener of any topic of the National Academies. And because of that, we've had some significant effect over the research enterprise over time. So if you go on this chart to June 5th, 1985, you may remember this as a familiar topic that your group talks about, reducing bureaucratic accretion in government and university procedures to enhance sponsored research. I think that's a common theme in the US research ecosystems literally every year and could be at every meeting as we try to streamline our ability to do competitive research while reducing the bureaucracy that sometimes can be through the regulatory and compliance environment that happens in the US research ecosystem. So I think that's something to note. And if you see on this timeline, you'll see a number of organizations that are in the government that were initiated. I can't say they were completely done by GUIRR convenings, but because we have investigated certain models carefully, we know that they have an ability to accelerate innovation and close the gap from breakthrough to application to practice, which is why you see on this chart the emergence of the ARPA model through the form of IARPA starting in 2007 to ARPA-E starting in 2009, and then most recently to 2 new ARPAs, ARPA-H and ARPA-I, where the I on this I stands for infrastructure, starting in 2022. But there's been a number of convenings that have had incredible impact. So if you go to February 8th through 9th, 2011, cybersecurity in the coming decade was one of our convenings, using security to support the value of intellectual property. Again, something where we brought the community together at the emergence of a very hot topic of cybersecurity, which has now been something of incredible importance to the United States from a safety and security perspective, but also from a research perspective as it continues to evolve even in 2024. Now coming to where we are today, on June 25th and 26th earlier of this year, we had the opportunity to not only celebrate the contributions of GUIRR over time and to bring all the historical folks together to reflect about its accomplishments, but to pivot and figure out where are we heading in the future. The topic of our workshop convening was reimagining the triple helix of innovation, investments, and partnerships. And I'll talk a little bit more about the detail of that workshop in just a moment. But it's really was a chance to kind of also look at all the accomplishments that GUIRR has had over the years. So what I would like to highlight, just a few successes. So one success in a GUIRR meeting was on rare earth minerals, led to a discussion with the House Science Committee asking to repeat the meeting discussion for the benefit of congressional members, and an RFA was developed encouraging public-private partnerships in the development of rare earth metals. This ended up being sort of a new policy decision that came out of a discussion of a GUIRR convening on rare earth minerals, which really affect a number of technology products in the United States and the world. A second accomplishment in the meeting on high-risk, high-return science provided a GUIRR FDA representative with a specific example of a regulatory burden involving a DARPA challenge problem met with success by industry, and then was able to take these lessons back from this meeting to their agency to streamline and affect policy change to encourage high-risk, high-return science at the FDA. And then finally, there was a GUIRR meeting on novel financing innovation. It was attended by Schmidt Futures with the Office of Science and Technology and Policy. The written meeting summary caught the attention of the Angel Capital Association, ACA, and the GUIRR and the ACA collaborated to co-host a workshop that led to a joint project to examine the overlaps between angel groups and successful R&D commercialization, trying to close the gap from where R&D ends to where angel starts and larger venture leads to translatable to products and independent private financing. So this was, again, a wonderful thing where we're trying to enhance the US research ecosystem and bridge the gap, in this case, between novel financing models that go from public to private. Now, I want to highlight a very recent GUIRR Council meeting and workshop in where the terms axiom of innovations were discussed in one of our GUIRR Council meetings back in the summer of 2023 and a little bit earlier. So what came up in this meeting, and this is the typical format of a typical GUIRR meeting. We usually have a technical speaker who speaks at a GUIRR Council meeting. In this case, we had Dr. Ashley Lawrence, who's pictured here from Microsoft Research Corporation, and he ended up talking to us back then on the future of AI. That's typically a 45-minute sort of presentation with some Q&A, but following that discussion or that presentation, we usually have a discussion on what could be some future topics that we need to flush out for a series of workshops going forward and webinars going forward in the future. And we were fortunate that this concept of asking the hard questions can come out in our GUIRR Council meetings. So one of my colleagues who works for the Department of Defense Research and Development proposed this concept of the axioms of innovation. So what are the key ingredients that makes the US research ecosystem innovative, accelerates translation and discovery, and accelerates breakthroughs? So what are those elements, and how do we parse through those elements to make them more efficient as we go forward? So that led to a great discussion and to a number of themes that plays out in some of the current workshops that we're using going forward in the GUIRR meetings. Also in our GUIRR Council meetings, and when we have a GUIRR Council meeting, we have a technical speaker like Dr. Ashley Lawrence. We have a discussion like we just talked about the axioms of innovation. And then we have a dinner speaker. And that dinner speaker is to tease out even more innovation. So at the same, in that same day, in the evening, we had a fireside chat with Dr. Regina Dugan, who was the former DARPA director, who now leads an organization called Welcome Leap in the UK, and they're working on international innovation. So this is Dr. Dugan, and she gave a talk on Welcome Leap and what they were trying to do. So she's president and CEO of Welcome Leap, the former DARPA director at DARPA here in the United States, and she has built a global version of DARPA. So the model that the US knows very well over the last 50, 60 years of how DARPA innovates and translates, she's now doing that at a global scale for the Welcome Leap Foundation. And her quote is, "We systematically stack the odds in favor of breakthroughs." So she's developed a model that she's working on really basic and applied science and trying to turn those into rapid breakthroughs by how she structures her research and program management. She spoke when she was DARPA director of the investment in mRNA research that led to the availability of vaccines. If DARPA doesn't make that investment, it is doubtful that we would have had COVID-19 vaccines turn around as fast as you saw with Moderna and with Pfizer in the US that only took about 11 to 12 months to actually get something from the benchtop to the product and in the arms of human beings. She also spoke about the importance of Pasteur's quadrant, research that is high in basic science content, but with focused practical applications. And her other famous quote for the night was, "We need more breakthroughs and we need them faster to really have economic security in the US." Now, what are these axioms of innovation? And this is, again, courtesy of my colleague from the Department of Defense, Dr. Bindu Nair, who came up with the terminology, which also led to a paper that you can all download off of the National Academy's website and the GUIRR website called Interpreting the Axioms of Innovation. And essentially, these were some of the key elements that we think enhance the U.S. research ecosystem. One, you got to have top talent. Of course, we all know that. You got to have top talent of the highest quality for the research that you're trying to accomplish. It's about culture, shared values, beliefs, norms that make that particular research operation very efficient and effective going forward. Pastor's Quadrant, how you can take use-inspired, mission-driven research to get to an outcome faster than you would normally do. You got to have a vision for what you're trying to do in research. And of course, you've got to have resources, the money, the instrumentation, the software, and the tools to make it successful. The Hellmeyer Catechism is a DARPA term. And essentially, it's asking the right questions about the technology that you're trying to have, say, a twofold, threefold, fivefold, tenfold improvement. Can you ask the right questions that closes whose answers lead to closing the gap and in maybe having a tenfold improvement in a particular metric? Are partnerships important to your research? And then there's got to always be this sense of urgency that you have to get the work done as fast as possible. So this is what came out of this GUIRR Council discussion. And now what we're doing as we go forward in this 40th anniversary year is we're taking elements of that and we're turning them into workshops. And so we'd like to walk you through what a typical workshop looks from this discussion that came out of a GUIRR Council meeting. So we held a workshop last summer, and it followed CHIPS and Science Act, and we focused on the underpinning norms, conditions, and cultures of a successful research innovation environment. We convened senior leaders from government and academia to help us answer these questions. So this is what a typical workshop looked like, focusing on a few elements of those axioms of innovation. So we had 4 sessions, 2 in the morning, 2 in the afternoon. The first 2 sessions I'm going to talk about. The first one was on measuring innovation. How do you measure research innovation? The second session was on incentivizing innovation. How do you incentivize research innovation in a very systematic way? And then there was 2 other sessions on comparing innovation cultures, which are clearly important, like the DARPA culture that we just spoke about. And then how do you structure innovation for success? I'm just going to highlight the first 2. So session 1, measuring innovation. We had some incredible speakers from academia and from a foundation. I want to highlight Dr. Daishan Wang, who's a professor at Northwestern University, who has written extensively on this topic of how to measure innovation. And Dr. Wang, in the right part of this chart, says, data of Nobel Prize winners show that the peak contribution in research typically occurs around the age of 40. Now that's on average. Doesn't mean that you don't contribute by age of 60 or 70. He just says that the peak tends to be around 40 of your research contribution. Number 2, breakthroughs occur at random. So that means that they could occur at any time over your research career, not just at the average of 40. So you could have a breakthrough at 60, at 70. So they do occur at random, and you still have to cultivate them. And then faculty, researchers in government labs and in industry have what he calls periods of hot streaks, in which several great works are produced over a time period of a few years, occur randomly within an academic or government or industry research career. And then finally, he said the importance of teams in today's research environment, extremely important to bring diverse talent to a problem that helps accelerate a research breakthrough and translatable research. So he talked about the example of the importance of teams for the LIGO project from Caltech, which was the gravity wave experiment funded by NSF over about 25 years that had 1,000 co-authors on the paper. Now that might be a little too extreme in terms of a large team, but the importance of teams is paramount to accelerating breakthroughs and success. Now he's written a book called The Science of Science, and really it's the science of how to do innovative science going forward, which kind of emphasizes many of these items that I just spoke to you about. But that was one of the sessions in which we talked about measuring innovation. We also talked about incentivizing innovation. And we had several great speakers there too. Dr. Evelyn Wang, who's the director of RPE, Dr. Cordell Hardy, and then Dr. Len Polizotto, who's an innovation and entrepreneurship guy from Northeastern University. But Dr. Wang spoke about how when they are at RPE, they are looking at how to take technology that they think are going to have translatable true impact on the energy ecosystem of the United States. So RPE's job is to invest in early stage technology, but to get it to a point where private investment also comes in. So they have something called the ARPA scale up. As you see in this diagram, there's sort of three mountains there. One is ARPA-E funding basic research and applied research, and then ARPA-E scale up funding the sort of prototype with hopefully that they reach their technical metrics and their management metrics, and the hope that then expose this to the private industry and private investors who will then take it to scalability at full scale. But ARPA-E plays that middle mountain role as well to get something to a much more mature prototype for the US government and for the US energy system. So again, this is incentivizing innovation by using government monies to provide that transition to private monies. Okay, what else does GUIRR do? So GUIRR does webinars as well and other workshops. So this is just a list, a kaleidoscope of things that we've been doing over the last couple of years. We did the strategic innovation and commercialization, supporting IP and tech transfer to advance US research competitiveness, supporting partnership for future security and sustainability workshop. We had a strengthening US science technology leadership through global cooperation and partnerships. And you can read over and over. And then finally, where we are today, GUIRR at 40, reimagining the triple helix of innovation, investments, and partnerships. So there's changing dynamics ahead with GUIRR, and pretty exciting changing dynamics. We want to be partners with FDP as well. And so what are we doing now? Some new developments, stakeholders beyond traditional GUIRR membership we've been looking at over the last couple of years. We've been also looking at new and diverse funding structures, both domestically and from around the world. We've been looking at globalization opportunities and threats. We've also looked at the same things that you look at a little bit, which is implications of the regulatory and national security environment on the research enterprise of the United States. And we look at new partnership models on basic research. And finally, we look at accelerating pace of technological change because technology seems to be moving more quickly, especially electronics and quantum. And then now we are emerging into a whole new domain space where we see the recognition of the role of philanthropy for funding research that may not be funded by government, that may not be funded by industry, and that may not even be funded by academia. This is a new domain space for us. And this is exciting. We also held in June a keynote talk with Jack Scannell, CEO of Atheros Pharmaceuticals, who talked about the S&T agenda increasingly including private industry and private philanthropy and funding research related to things that advance society that maybe the government might not fund because it's not in their mission-driven areas. So there's this balance between closed and open systems for proprietary IP and national security, and then there's this growing importance of philanthropy, valuing, investing, venture philanthropy, and new economic models for underwriting university research. So one of the most recent exciting successes of GUIRR is that we have now really embraced the philanthropic role that plays in research funding, so significantly enough that we voted at our last meeting to change the name of GUIRR. And on the right side of this chart, you see that recognizing the importance of philanthropy in supporting and shaping the US innovation ecosystem, GUIRR is changing its name to the Government University Industry Philanthropy Research Roundtable, or GUIRR. Now I know it's going to take some time to get used to that name, but this is where we're moving towards, and philanthropy in the United States and in the world is becoming a larger and more important source of funding to fund sort of public interest research or things that have a social justice context. but things that maybe the government won't fund. So this is an exciting domain space for the United States to investigate, and for the GUIRR panel and GUIRR Council to convene and bring in these folks from the different foundations. So it's pretty exciting for us. Now, I'm going to go ahead and kind of tell you at the University of Maryland, we've taken some of these ideas at GUIRR, and we've tried to develop our own programs and models to really advance our research to have more societal impact. And I just want to share 3 topics with you. So the first is we've got this new Grand Challenges grant program, which we did a $30 million initiative across the entire campus. We had 300 proposals for funding for about 50 projects. And that's to pivot our university to focus on real societal problems, leveraging research, but research that translates to practice. And I want to talk to you about sort of 3 things that we're working on. The first one we're working on is in the area of literacy, childhood literacy. So in the state of Maryland, about 15% of the 3rd and 4th graders don't read at a 3rd or 4th grade level. So we want to radically change that and reduce that level of low literacy to a level of higher literacy. So our faculty members have formed a team that includes multiple stakeholder groups across many colleges, and they are now working with the state of Maryland to work on how to develop new techniques, new learning tools to help children read, both in rural, suburban, and urban Maryland. So we're very excited about the potential of this project, but it's sort of born out of these GUIRR meetings about how can you be more impactful in the research that you do that actually translates to real people and advances societal needs. Secondly, we are also working on something called the Global Future Alliance, which allows partnerships with various countries to help reduce food insecurity around the world. So we have a group of faculty from multiple colleges led by the School of Public Health who are working on solutions on the energy, water, food nexus. So for example, we are working with some folks in the city of Baltimore on an urban farm to help them develop technology that makes the farming in the urban domain more efficient, use less energy and less water to feed a local community. Very exciting projects, but we also do this around the world. So again, taking our research and translating it to best practices. And then finally, we have distributed a sensor network across the entire state of Maryland. We're now able to measure microclimates in local regions, but also see how it affects the entire state and the entire region of the DMV with these sensors that are in every county of the state of Maryland and the city of Baltimore. And we're able to do predictions to help decision makers sort of be prepared for the impending weather and climate that's coming towards their region. So it's another exciting project where we're using research and modeling and sensors to help do predictive climate models to help, again, decision makers as they make decisions for their community. So what's the work ahead for GUIRR? Well, the work ahead is to continue to hold these convenings on behalf of the U.S. research ecosystem. And there's a few of the topics that we have recently completed or are in progress as we go forward. And it's super exciting because now we'll add this element of philanthropy to the GUIRR focus. And so again, our job is to enhance the U.S. research ecosystem and to accelerate our ability to translate ideas to a mission-driven solution or to products for the U.S. economy, but to take the best practices and present that to our larger community by bringing stakeholder groups together. We also want to work with FDP. Here's our next convening this fall. So we're going to have Dr. Stephanie Hopkins, who's the current DARPA director. We'll have discussion topics that will include balancing national security and rapid innovation. We hope that you will attend. We'll look at this ARPA model that has been used now multiple times in the US government to help enhance innovation, research innovation, and ecosystem for different domain spaces. And then we'll be looking at managing incentives and culture to accelerate cross-sector collaborations across, again, government, university, industry, philanthropy, and other not-for-profits. So this is going to be an exciting meeting for us. And again, our goal is to always enhance the effectiveness of the research that we do in terms of research innovation. And this is my last chart. And of course, we care about our partnership with FDP. So we want to enhance the interactive relationship between GUIRR and FDP. We want to also exchange thoughts, ideas, and feedback on current and proposed research policy and administrative processes to enhance everything that we all do. And we want to reduce the administrative burdens associated with federal research grants and contracts. But most importantly, we want to strengthen the quality and impact of the nation's research enterprise together. So thank you so much. I look forward to your questions. I'll get out of sharing my screen. It's been a pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much on behalf of everyone here in the audience. We really appreciate the thoughtfulness that went into this presentation, President Pines. And in particular, I took note of the very first GUIRR meeting having focused on research regulations and the administrative burdens. So I hope that helps everyone in our membership to understand the close DNA between our two respective branches, if you will, of the policy and global affairs tree. We have a question from Joshua Rosenblum, which I'm going to ask, and then I'll let you respond to that, but it'll take a minute to say it. Okay, so thank you for a fascinating presentation. You articulated a set of axioms of innovation in your presentation. I'm curious about what you see as the open questions about promoting effective innovation. That is what you do wish we knew more about. That is, what do you wish we knew more about related to the innovation ecosystem? And conversely, what do you feel we know with confidence? So what should we know more about, and what do we know with confidence about the innovative ecosystem? I think it's
I think there are lots of answers to this question. I think in the U.S., we believe that our models are the best. This is just, I think it's a little bit of arrogance, a little bit of, well, we've been successful. We think we're still ahead of the world. But I think we're also ignorant of how the world does its own research ecosystem. So I think that's the first thing I would say. That doesn't mean that the U.S. is incredibly bad. It's just that there are maybe some models that we don't know about. And so it would be nice to have more international speakers, collaborations, to see if there's some things that we can learn and glean from how others develop their own research ecosystem. So that would say the number one. Number two, we know that cultures of innovations are key to success. So this concept of the DARPA model, we know that there has been many, many success stories for DARPA. That's why we see us replicating this model over and over again in different domain spaces: energy, infrastructure, healthcare, which these are all brand new, of course, these new organizations, but we know that it's had success. So that's something that we've covered. So, where does it make sense to do a quote unquote another like ARPA type model is important. I think also the challenge comes in, how do we bridge the gap between basic science funding, applied science and research funding, and then when did it get handed off to either philanthropic or to venture support? That is not optimized yet in our system by policies or anything. So there's always these sort of gaps, and they need to be optimized. And I think we haven't done it as well. So there's always room for improvement there. And then finally, when we're doing sort of use-inspired research, we always need to be asking the right questions about the problems that we're trying to solve to help distill the best approaches. So.
Thank you so much. And I want to invite everyone to utilize the chat to ask, the Q&A to ask your questions. And while you are all mulling that over, I have a question of my own. You may have recalled from the very introduction to this session that we're in the midst of organizing the next faculty workload survey. That survey is meant to probe the perceptions of faculty about research regulations from federal sponsors, as well as the implementation at home institutions, and how that affects their day-to-day ability to do their work, and importantly, how much time they spend on that. So I wonder if you have put some thought into that issue. I sense that you have, because I work closely with some of your colleagues at the University of Maryland. Are there specific areas that you think and you encounter when you talk to faculty that we should be focused on? That's one part of my question. And the second is, in what way do you think administrative burden may affect our ability to be nimble and innovative in the way in which we translate that into use-inspired outcomes?
So I think, again, lots of answers to this question, Dr. Masucci. I think we have overly burdened, I think, both our research staff and our faculty with issues related to regulatory environment. So I'll give you an example. So at University of Maryland, we just upgraded our software system to handle conflicts of interest, to try to make sure that we are in compliance with all federal and state regulations so that faculty don't step out of the guardrails of research as it relates to intellectual property, their own ability to do startups, and entities that may cause trouble with our federal government. So we upgraded our software. Now we are training and educating all of our faculty across the entire university to be able to use that software. So that's just going to take some time, and over a couple of years, I think we'll be at a steady state. So that's just extra work for the faculty member, extra work for the staff, but it's the right thing to do, but it's just going to take time. And when you change things, it always just takes time, right? So that's one area. The other area of education that's required comprehensively that we are all doing is constantly educating our faculty on security issues as it relates to national security and what is allowable and what is not allowable. So that again, we're educating. It will take time for faculty to adapt and then to be able to do their collaborative research that's within the guardrails as well. Again, but this is an education process. So these are the things that are two big things that are changing that take some time, slow our faculty down from doing the collaborative, impactful research, but are necessary as it relates to the emerging national security environment that we are also in.
Thank you for that response. And let me just share that you can't hear it because we're in a webinar format, but many, many administrators on this call cheered the fact that you recognize how hard administrators work
Our
to try to
administrators
keep
are killing
order.
themselves. I mean,
They
the
are.
problem that happens is, and we just got to say this as it is, these regulatory and compliance things come down from the federal government, and they don't come with any money. So the same staff is overly burdened to adapt to these new policy changes. They got to learn them first. They then got to educate all the administrators, and they got to educate all the faculty, and they're doing it with no extra money with the same people. It's not a happy situation, and it is a bottleneck in our system, because it doesn't come with funding. And so you're doing it with the same time. And if you can find the funding within your institution, then you can cover the folks to get more folks on this problem. But it's a zero-sum game, right? So you lose something when you have to pivot to do something else.
I think you're speaking to the chorus here. That was very well said. We have a number of questions that have come in while we've been chatting. Okay, so I'll start with this one. Again, thank you for this informative presentation. What are your thoughts around GUIRR's role in evaluating the need for regulatory guardrails around potential application of breakthrough advanced technologies?
Yeah, so that's a great question because that's a topic we've been thinking about. And we may do this in partnership with you, which is we believe that breakthroughs are being hindered a bit by the regulatory environment and the compliance environment, but I don't have any evidence of that. It's my suspicion. So we may have a workshop on this topic. We also believe that we need clear guidance on security issues so that we know when we can collaborate with foreign entities and in what ways that help accelerate, again, research breakthroughs. So this is another topic that's probably combined with the other topic. And, but yes, we believe that the freedom that we had before has been a bit minimized, but it's understandable. And we're all trying to adapt, but we're also trying to make sure that it doesn't hinder breakthroughs in all forms of science.
And in fact, the parallel workshop that's going on right now at the National Academies is exactly on that point. What are the metrics we need to have to help us evaluate the impact of these policies? So parallel to us is a conversation going on about that, but I do think that both FDP and GUIRR need to be in that conversation. So thank you for raising that. Carmen Schultz asks or says, philanthropy is an interesting funding concept. Are there worries with respect to the national research security connected to philanthropic funding?
I mean, there could be some. It's a legitimate concern for Herman to have. But for example, what we discovered, we had a session on it at one of our last workshops, and the whole for the 5 panelists were from the philanthropic domain space. But there are things that are like fundamental science that no one funds, that we could be funded by philanthropists who care about a particular problem that's not covered by any agency in the federal government. So it actually opens, what we found is it opens up a whole new spectrum of research funding that are driven by certain foundations. And as we all know, foundations and their ability to give has grown exponentially over the last 10 to 20 years. So there's this unique opportunity to find those windows where, for at least for university-based research, where you might go to a philanthropic arm to do some fundamental basic science work, and that may get you to a little level of maturity that allows you to go to the NSF or some other organization, right, in the federal government. But often it's at a level where maybe the federal government doesn't care about that problem, but the philanthropic arm does, and is willing to explore it with you. So there were many examples that were given at our last GUIRR workshop in this panel that were really just eye-opening for all of us. And so it really allowed us to say we needed to pivot as an organization to include P in our acronym so that we can embrace this new mechanism of funding. But yes, there could be national security concerns if not properly managed as well.
Yeah, thank you. We also, I think, have to worry about how do we count that money in terms of is it
That's
research?
true.
Some people are going to be focused on that question too, since we're all going to be talking about the Carnegie classifications tomorrow. Maybe that'll be a subject we can reach there. I think this is a really good question by Susan Anderson, which is that she's curious about how U.S. administrative burden compares with burden experienced by international colleagues. I wonder if we've ever done any data collection around that.
No, at least I don't think GUIRR has. However, in one of those sessions where it was called Measuring Innovation, our colleague, Dr. Wong from Northwestern, did a comparative study across multiple countries, not just the US, and found that breakthroughs happen a little bit, maybe just by economies of scale. More US researchers had breakthroughs than others across the world, but that the number of breakthroughs were going down over time, meaning that science had uncovered some of the more fundamental work, and now it took team science to take it to a whole nother level. So there were delays in breakthroughs or in fewer number of breakthroughs. But in terms of whether there's more administrative burden overseas, we actually have not looked at that particular problem.
Yeah, well, I don't think we have either. I think that we do have amongst our faculty reps the International Secretary for the National Academies, and I know that John Hildebrand is his name, and he spends a lot of time working with the similar academy bodies around the world. Maybe it's something we can bring to him to probe and see if there's a way that we could pursue that a little bit more. Here's another question about philanthropy. So intrigued by fast tracking basic science to utilization and market. It reminds me of the CTSA Clinical and Translational Science Awards to speed research discoveries to improved healthcare. Do you agree that that's an applicable model, and can you expand on philanthropy's potential role in this?
Yeah, I mean, I think, so for example, when I was at DARPA, there was always, so DARPA's model is, let's take, a technology, let's develop a prototype, let's work with the service arm to see if they're interested. What would often happen is you would develop a technology, it would reach a prototype stage, but it was too early for the service side to accept it. That's where a place where the philanthropic arm could come in to help take it to a further level of maturity over a time of, say, 3 to 5 years, by the time which maybe the service organization might be ready for it. But if it doesn't get that funding, it's not going to get it from venture funding, it's not going to get it from angel funding, so it's just going to sit on the vine. But it's not ready yet, simply not ready for prime time. So we found that many, many times, really good technology would just sit there. It would need another boost of funding, but it wouldn't be coming from the government because we didn't have a service demand at that time. However, 5, 10 years later, then the service would realize, oh, we really need that now. And now they put the money in. But it could have been done by a philanthropic arm. So I think there are many examples where there's this gap where you get somewhere and this could take it to a whole nother level of maturity. Or let's say it's not even translatable in that way. Let's say it's just a social justice problem. Or let's say it's not going to be monetized, but it's information or data that's so important the rest of the world could use it. So who's going to fund that if it's not monetized? Well, hopefully a philanthropic entity could do that because the data is still important to society. So, so it just depends on where there are these windows of opportunity where government doesn't cover it and philanthropy could cover it because it has societal impact, not to be monetized, but societal impact in a positive way, or that there's this gap in a prototype of technology that needs a little bit more time to mature, and then it could become monetized.
I think that's a really good point. And I think, we often spend our time talking about commercialization through the vehicle of startups and on a company formation side, but I think there's an important role for other types of startups, kind of like your engineering for us. There's a nonprofit world, which also allows us to
Correct.
extend, our impact. So I think it's really important that you pointed out where those gaps are.
I mean, I just want to say, can I make just a little
Yeah.
comment? I sit on the board of Underwriters Laboratory Research Institute, which is a 501c3. And it is one of those philanthropic arms that it only cares about making the world safer. No one's going to fund that, but they fund it themselves through monies that they get from a test service that they have, that they own. Generates revenue, creates a foundation, and now they're funding, I'll give you an example, they fund research on micro-mobility devices like scooters, electric scooters, and trying to come up with methodologies and approaches to reduce them from having electric fires of the batteries. These are the kind of things that they care about because it makes society more safer and reduce the number of incidents related to fires on scooters or fires in electric vehicles like Teslas. So this is a perfect organization that's philanthropic, but focused on things that are valuable for society.
Thank you. That's a great example. Our colleague Stephen Dowdy from the University of Maryland asks, what can GUIRR do to help remove the administrative cap on F&A, since you mentioned we have to do more with less? Our F&A is capped. Industry's F&A is not capped. Why are we penalized in higher ed? I think many of us.
That's a good question, Steve.
We all want to know.
But that's something that we have been talking about in GUIRR about, and now this becomes where the GUIRR convening, I think, has a way to possibly affect policy change. So you got to bring in the stakeholder groups, have a focused discussion on this. How can we affect change so that policymakers and OSTP and others also support that change, but it would come through a group GUIRR convening where we're saying this is where we're falling short. So I'm happy to do that either through a webinar or with my colleagues on the GUIRR Council and have that discussion. But I think it's over a longer period of time that we can affect that change. Again, GUIRR does lots of things, right, to affect change. Sometimes it brings you new ideas. Sometimes it's that kind of convening on F&A to see if we can move the decision makers to change policies, right? But that's the whole purpose of having these conversations.
Well, I think it also raises another concern. I wonder what your take on this statement would be, which is not only is the F&A capped, but once research moves into the private sphere in commercialization, where there is no cap for industries to further develop that, we also lose any additional knowledge that comes out of that advancement of that science. So it sometimes feels like we're penalized twice. We're penalized once because we don't actually get the dollars that we need to further develop the technology, and then society loses access to data itself that emerges on the company side. What do you think of my comment? Is that too
your comment is spot on. So this goes back to the issue of, the US systems are not optimized, right? So there are shortfalls, just like the one you're alluding to right now. And so how do we fix that so that we don't lose, funding to advance the IP of a product, and that the institution gains by some process, right? So this is exactly the kinds of conversations that we should be having because the whole idea is to make the US ecosystem much more optimized, much more effective and efficient to achieve our US national economy goals, and then to grow research breakthroughs, right? So this is exactly the kinds of issues that we all have to wrestle with.
Well, related to the same topic as an anonymous question, do large companies working with government and research organizations offer the same criteria for improvement for the suggested axioms? Do they offer more emphasis on other areas?
I think it depends. I think some corporations focus on certain things differently than academic institutions. I used to work at a government lab. It focused on innovation that was purely mission driven, less focused on intellectual property or translating that IP to products. But to achieve their mission, they had an innovative structure that accelerated breakthroughs to implementation in a laboratory environment, right? With no goal of translating any ideas outside the laboratory, but just for advancing science. And so I think the models change in different domain spaces for what your end product is. And so it just depends on what domain space you live in.
Couple more questions, and then I promise we will let you go to the rest of your day. Susan Anderson asks, I do have a concern about shifting responsibility for public good support from government to philanthropy. How do we address that?
Well, I mean, it's been in existence for years. So there's now something that is, so there's been public interest foundations for years, hundreds of years. So, and they have been created because the government wasn't doing that work, or maybe not that enough of that work sufficiently for some philanthropists. So I don't know if we're doing, taking the responsibilities where we're actually opening up the aperture to cover more. And with the growth of foundations exponentially in the last decade, there's more opportunity to do that public interest work that maybe isn't fully covered by the government, in my opinion.
I think that's well said. This is going to be the last question from Bill Mosley. The concept of private philanthropy stepping in to assist with filling the gap between government funding and commercially viable technologies. However, private philanthropy tend to terms and conditions on their awards that pose challenges for universities. Particularly, they have IP terms requiring making technology publicly available or sharing IP revenue back to the philanthropic organization. They also tend to require reduced F&A. Is there anything GUIRR can do to move the needle on those kinds of terms and conditions on awards if private philanthropy is going to be a bigger player in the technology development arena? I think that's a really important question.
I think it's a great question, and I think it's something that definitely we want to look at going forward and bring more philanthropists together with folks from institutions to have that discussion to see if we can build a better model for even that. I mean, I totally agree with him. It's right now new blue ocean, but it isn't perfect either, and we need to look carefully at the administrative models to make it happen.
Well, clearly your comments have struck a chord with our membership, especially about the GUIRR rename, and we will follow up in our meetings to try to socialize some of that direction here, because I think there's going to be a lot of additional interest, and I think you can tell by the comments that there's a sort of technical understanding we have of this world that may be useful in the GUIRR conversation as well. I want to give a very special thanks to you, Darryl, for joining us. I hope that the members will correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe this is the first time that the academic co-chair of GUIRR has spoken to the FDP members. So I am very grateful to you for taking time out of your busy day to do that, because it took time, and I could tell that you spend a lot of time on the presentation. I also want to commend you on all the work that you've done at the University of Maryland to pull the concepts that come out of GUIRR into everyday practice on your campus. And hopefully that can be a source of inspiration for other universities that are represented here on the call. So I want to thank you very much for your time today, and to all of our members for joining us. Just as a reminder to everyone, we have our next plenary coming up with NIST, I believe at 12:30. Sarah, can you correct me if I got that wrong?
That is correct.
Thank you. So with that, let us give you a very warm welcome. And, you cannot see all the clapping hands behind the webinar, but we'll do it on their
Thank
behalf.
you very much. And
Thank you, Dr.
have a
Pine.
great rest of your sessions today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.